Hey, Strick, this is the first time ever here on the Nice Guys on Business we're actually going to offer a gift.
We've pretended to offer gifts in the past, but we're going to offer a really useful gift now, right?
Very, very cool gift. 5 ways to make money podcasting. There's one specifically in there that we have used to build a 6-figure income. If you want your free gift, all you need to do is go to turnkeypodcast.com/gift. Check it out today.
Is that it? That was it? Under 30 seconds? That's amazing.
It was that part of the commercial?
Turnkeypodcast.com/gift. Well, it was part of the commercial, but now if we leave it in, it's more than 30 seconds, so we can't do that. Yeah.
Here's what you can look forward to on this episode of The Nice Guys on Business.
These are the things that you're great at that you would do for free. I mean, truthfully, one of the things that I have to talk with people about is stop giving that away. That's your magic. And they're like, yeah, but I don't want to charge. And I'm like, if there's something that you're so good at that you don't even want to charge because you love it so much, that's what you should charge for. I mean, that's your top end stuff.
You may have seen a housefly or maybe even a superfly, but you've never seen the Nice Guys on Business fly. Need an education on how to grow your business? The Nice Guys are here to help. Learn about great customer service, networking, and how just being nice can help you prosper. Now, here are your hosts, Doug Sandler and Strickland Bonner.
Nice Guy community, we've talked about this many, many, many times. Surviving simply isn't enough. We should be thriving. Now, Lee Baucom is an expert in thriving no matter what life throws your way. He helps people to thrive in their relationships and their lives. Lee is the host of 3 podcasts. We're all addicted to podcasting according to my standards here. 3 is, Lee, you gotta start achieving some level of, 6, 7, 8 podcasts.
Gotta step it up.
Well, the 3 that Lee hosts right now, the Thriveology Podcast, the Save the Marriage Podcast. I found that one a little too late. And the and the Man of Significance podcast. And if you're listening now in November of 2019, this show, Man of Significance podcast, will be launching in the end of this year, the beginning of 2020. He's also the author of 7 books and works with people around the world to find their meaning and their purpose and to make their impact in the world. Hold on tight if you want to better understand relationships, how to have a better marriage, more significance in your life, how to avoid fear, how to thrive. I had an opportunity to learn from and with Lee while attending the New Media Summit, and I love his approach to not only business, but especially his approach to life. Lee, welcome to the Nice Guys on Business podcast.
Oh, man, Doug, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I love having you here, Lee, and you were one of those guys that just stood out in the crowd because one of the things we talked about in, I don't know if we talked about this in New Media Summit, but we did talk about this recently in our pre-recording conversation, was that people oftentimes have this fear that difficulty is it means you're on the wrong path. And I want to share not only a little bit of your story, but I want to talk about that as we get into it, because those that are listening, I want them to just jump in right now. We all are facing these difficult times when it comes to running a business, thriving in our business, and kind of moving to that next step. And sometimes we feel like difficulty means that we're going down the wrong way. So why don't you share a little bit of your path and talk about this difficulty means you're not necessarily on the wrong path?
Yeah. So part of my story of entrepreneurship is I didn't actually realize that was what I was for years. I just knew I made a really bad employee. In fact, I had a number of review times when I would walk in and I knew the person who was the director. I was trained as a therapist, but had already done a number of businesses really since I was a teenager. I was no, this is a little secret there, Doug, but
right.
I was, we won't tell anyone, right?
Sure.
So I was a magician when I was a teenager. So,
no kidding.
Yeah. In the nerdy ranks, I was right there. But I was a magician who made some pretty decent money when I was a teenager because I did parties all the time. And I didn't ever really think that I was, in business. I was doing magic shows and getting paid for it. And so even when I look back, I did that. I helped run a clothing store when the owner was burned out, and pretty much did everything from ordering the stuff to taking care of other people on staff. And I was a teenager at that point. And then I did the same thing with a restaurant. The owner was burned out and I ran the restaurant or helped run the restaurant. And what I realized along the way is I really didn't like being told what to do. So that kind of extended into my life as trained as a therapist, and yet I worked in an agency, which brings us to that point when I would walk into the job review, annual review, and say, "Hey, I know I'm a really bad employee. You can get rid of me. I'm happy to go somewhere else if you want." And what they basically did, and where I kind of made my way, is when they let me do what I thought was best. And so they stuck me in a satellite office and let me run that program. And it became really the only thing that kept that center in business. I was kind of the cash cow for a long time. And so along the way, I realized at some point, this is a realization that I think, we all realize that at some point no matter what we're doing, if we're professionals, we're an hourly employee. I mean, as a therapist, I can only see so many clients. I can only do so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so at one point, I decided to start a business on the side, and which was no surprise, I don't think, to my wife. But this was a bigger gamble than I thought. And so here I was trying as a therapist to figure out how to make an extra income stream for my family. I'd been in grad school for forever. I was talking with someone the other day, and I said I was in grad school from college to the end of grad school, as long as I was from kindergarten to the end of high school. I mean,
Wow, professional student, way to go!
It was a long time, yeah. And along the way,
did you ever see the 40-Year-Old Virgin? You ever watch that?
Yeah, thanks. No, fortunately for me, I had to work along the way. That was the thing about being trained as a therapist. You can't just do school. You got to go do some real training. And so I actually was working for a good stint of that time. Other than college, I really was working the whole time on the side. But that was when I realized it. I'm like, this hourly thing, I mean, I can only go so far. And so I tried to create this business. And it crashed and burned. And I figured out why it crashed and burned, but it was a painful event for me, because while I was trying to build something for my family, what I ended up doing is putting us way deeper in debt. I'd already had a kind of a stunted professional life, because while I was working, I was also going to school. And so I couldn't really go full force. And so suddenly we were extra in debt with a business loan that had a rough payback, and I refused to do bankruptcy. I was like, I did this. I'm going to take it on, and I'm going to finish it, and learn some very important lessons along the way about what happens when you try to start a business that's not in your place of purpose or meaning. And incredibly painful event. And then stayed away for a while, but I wrote a book, and I thought, well, I'll just write this book and I'll be an author. And along the way, this was back in 1999, I had a friend who said, hey, who's going to publish that for you? I said, yeah, I'll figure it out when I finish it. He said, well, while you're trying to figure that out, why don't you make it an ebook? Now, an ebook, 1999, I'm like, what's an ebook?
Yeah, nobody knew that.
Well, no, it wasn't a 99-cent, thing that Amazon had done at that point. And so what I really didn't realize is I was getting into the informational marketing world. And I didn't really realize that even after I had a website up and I was selling the book and it was getting to be more and more successful. And so finally one day I was like, man, I'm one of those internet marketing guys. And so, I've had to revamp what I understood about myself. I kind of stumbled from entrepreneurship to entrepreneurship. And finally, one day I went, oh, that's the problem. I'm an entrepreneur. That's the personality pieces that I had missed along the way. But what I realized I like to do was to help people have better lives. I mean, if there's an entrepreneurship of that, it's really about how do you help people. So tail end of my graduate school, literally sitting at a desk, surrounded with my two little kids who were toddling around me with stacks of books everywhere, writing my dissertation. And I turned to my wife and I said, hey, I just read this article about this coaching thing. This was 1996, I think. And I said, that's what I do. And she said, wait, you've done a lot of schooling to be a therapist, and now you're telling me you want to be a coach? And I said, well, it's kind of how I do therapy. And so that launched me into the world of coaching. I did coach training, literally had not even turned in my dissertation, and I started a coach training program and took that into my clinical life. And so along the way, figured out that I was a coach, an entrepreneur, an informational marketer, a writer, now podcaster. All of that stuff just kind of fit into the place of how do you help people get to a place where life has more meaning for you. So how's that for a chunk?
No, that's really cool. And I appreciate you sharing all of that, because again, Nice Guy community, as you're checking this out, just think about your particular place in life and the journey that you have taken, especially as an entrepreneur. It's it really is a matter of just, you're never going to focus on, as an entrepreneur, I think our goal, we always think, is to get from point A to point Z and do it as profitably as we possibly can, not realizing oftentimes along the way there's a bunch of what we think at the time may be setbacks, but they're really opportunities for learning and growth and expansion. I want to talk about that for just a quick second, because not only do you have the therapy angle covered, but you also have the entrepreneurship angle covered as well. So what are some typical, and we'll get back to this difficulty question. I don't know if we actually hit on the difficulty means wrong path yet, but I want to talk just for a second about the idea of how to understand when you're experiencing, maybe what signals that you have in your own self when you are experiencing, I don't want to say fear, but potential setbacks, things that are wrong. You're just not going along the right path that you think that you're going. What's going through people's heads so that they know, maybe this is an opportunity for me to either experience growth, learn a lesson. These are the steps that I really need to take. So what are those symptoms, let's call it, that people are going through?
Yeah, there's the business side of that, right? I mean, there's at some point, for instance, when I was running the business, I kept pushing the business that failed. I kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And, a lot of people were just saying, you just got to push until you make it. And at one point I finally went, you know what, even if I made it, I don't want this and I'm not making it. And so there is that point when we all have to say as entrepreneurs, is this the right path? My concern with that is a lot of times what I watch people do is when they hit a difficult time, they don't step back and ask, is this a difficult time that I've got to work through versus does this mean I'm on the wrong path? So let's kind of circle around to that original conversation.
Yeah.
There's this kind of the myth, I think, and especially in the self-help world, I think there are two camps. One is the grind it out, right? And you just grind forever is the one camp. And then there's the other one that is, if you have to grind it all, something's wrong, and I think a lot of what we're hearing these days, especially with, The Secret and that kind of approach is, if you get a difficulty, it's, you've messed up. There's something wrong with your approach or something wrong with you, rather than accepting the fact that life is pretty difficult. So at times, and then other times it's great. And so one of the analogies I always talk about is, let's say that I decided I wanted bigger biceps for whatever reason. I think that's not a bad goal, but just decide I want to do that. What am I going to do to make that happen? It's not to go, I thought about it. I'm hoping they're going to arrive. And if I have to do any work, I must not, need that. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to challenge the muscle. I'm going to pick up something heavy, and it's actually going to do some damage to my bicep, but my bicep is going to react and grow back bigger and stronger. This is, so you talked about my relationship stuff work. So this is one of those interesting things to me. A lot of people will say, if the marriage was meant to be, it wouldn't be so hard. And I'm like, where do you apply that in the rest of your life? If school was meant to be, it wouldn't be this hard. I mean, how far do you get in school with that? If I was meant to be in shape, it wouldn't require me to go work out. If I was meant to eat well, then I wouldn't have to give up all these good stuff. And nowhere else do we really apply that, but really kind of in the self-development world and relationships, which I find to be interesting. The concept that I always point to for entrepreneurs is the idea of the anti-fragile company. There's that book that came out about anti-fragile that basically said there are 3 different categories that a company can be in, and I think also individuals. There's the fragile category where, maybe you're going okay until there's a bump, and as soon as you hit that bump, you are in trouble. And then there's the resilient company. That's the one that hits that same bump and they at least get back to where they were. But that's it. They're just back to where they were. The anti-fragile hits a bump, learns from it, grows from it, and grows into something bigger. It morphs into the next layer. And so it becomes anti-fragile or resilient, but beyond resilience, which I would call thriving. It's a thriving company because it takes on those difficulties and struggles and says, okay, what do we learn from this? How can we grow our base or our product line or whatever we need to be ready for the next iteration?
But before you go on, let me just throw this in there. Maybe you can help answer this because you've probably coached many companies and individuals through this. How do you know when you are actually finding yourself in a situation where the difficulty is because of a challenge that you want to push through, or the difficulty is a challenge that you may want to move in a different direction? Or are they all the same thing? They could just have they all, you can have a similar outcome regardless of how you got there.
Yeah. So, I think there is a place where you do have to kind of gather the business data for a company. You have to gather the business data. I mean, are we now in a place where we cannot succeed? And that's a matter of listening to some expertise around you, asking questions of people who might be able to tell you. But let's talk about it from a personal perspective. Because I think entrepreneurs are at risk of becoming addicted to success for success' sake instead of success that feeds them in some way. And that creates, so I call it hollow man syndrome, but hollow person syndrome.
Yep.
Since I work a lot with men, that tends to be hollow man syndrome. But hollow person syndrome is basically where it doesn't matter what success you have. It doesn't matter how many decimals there are in your bank account. You're just going, what's it matter? And there's that gnawing place, I think, that often entrepreneurs kind of replace with asking the question, what am I doing that is about my real purpose? What am I doing that makes a real difference? Versus, what is it that gives me that cheap, hey, we just landed that contract? I talked with this guy in my office years ago, and he said, man, I'm scared to death that I'm just not going to have enough money to pay the bills. And I'm like, oh, I mean, he's a successful entrepreneur, but we were just getting to know each other. I said, wow. I mean, so tell me what's going on. I mean, how bad is it? He said, man, I've only got $7 million in the bank. And I was going,
because could he been pulling your leg, or this is serious?
No.
This was like serious.
No, I mean, so what really had happened was he was very successful in one area, and he thought, I've got the golden touch. And so he touched another area that A, he didn't have much knowledge about, and B, he didn't really care about, but he thought I could do that. And it tanked. And so he was out, he went from 10 million to 7 million. Right. And so he was. So
there was a legitimate fear in there for him, because he's like, I lost 30% of my money. Could I turn around and lose 100% of my money?
I would say there was an illegitimate fear in there because the 3 million was gone. Right. And so if he did nothing, I mean, if he contracted back to, I'm just going to do this, right? I'm my own old business. I'm going to keep doing that. And I'm going to keep on living with the 7 million. I mean, how hard? He didn't live a big lifestyle. How hard would it be to live with the residuals of 7 million in your bank account if you're not spending, a lot in your lifestyle? Mm-hmm. So I would say no is actually an illegitimate fear place for him. It was more about his internal place where he was trying to find what would finally click. So what he was doing already filled his bank account, but didn't fill his soul. And I think there's an important place for people to kind of recognize, if you're doing something that either doesn't fill your soul or actually empties your soul, even if it fills your bank account, eventually that's going to leave you pretty hollow. And
so how do you advise people to find that thing, whatever that is? When we got into podcast production on the tail end of a business that was doing well, my speaking and training business, but I didn't love it. I mean, I was traveling a lot and I was on a plane a lot, and it was great, but it was a struggle not only to find the clients, but then to deliver the message, and then to be in and out of that town so quickly and to deal with those people. I'm a relationship builder, so I love what the network this has been able to build through podcasting, because we have a lot of clients that over and over and over again, they're using our services. And so for me, I wasn't getting that cup filled, but I needed to figure out, okay, what will fill that cup? So how do we know when our cup is not getting filled with that joy or that thrive feeling? versus a goal of just having more is never a good goal to set. So again, what's the trick or what's the hack, or what is the question that you need to ask yourself? There's many in our community that run their own businesses, do their own thing, and while they're happy, they're extremely busy, and busy doesn't necessarily equate to happy down the road. So how do you define what the next step is, or what makes you happy?
Yeah. So let's take apart the pieces. At some point, you had a successful business. It was feeding you. It was filling the bank account and all that stuff, and yet you were going. Just to say, hollow man syndrome, right? You left and you went, okay. Yeah, that was fun being in front of everybody. Yeah, it was fun getting a paycheck, but now I'm leaving, and the relationships aren't there, and all of that. So that leaves some clues. One of the things that I know about you, Doug, is you are relational to the core. And so it makes sense that if something is not feeding that, it's going to be hollow. Right?
Yeah, it makes sense to you. And I'm not saying that in a disrespectful way, but sometimes when I'm in the middle of it, I don't see it. It's like I'm in the middle of and Strickland and I, my partner in the podcast production business in Turnkey, we talk about this all the time. It's like when I'm in the middle of doing spreadsheets and accounting and that kind of stuff, I'm unhappy. I'm not in an unhappy business. I love the business, but I really only want to deal with the creative and the relationship and the selling side of that business. And until we actually dropped back and had a conversation about it, I wasn't real happy with the business. So sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you don't realize what you're in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Gay Hendricks talks about our zone of genius.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk about that all the time in staying in our zone of genius. Exactly.
And so that's, part of identifying that. And what he says is these are the things that you're great at that you would do for free. Truthfully, one of the things that I have to talk with people about is stop giving that away. That's your magic. And they're like, yeah, but I don't want to charge. And I'm like, if there's something that you're so good at that you don't even want to charge because you love it so much, that's what you should charge for. That's your top end stuff. And what we often end up being is that one layer down where it is, you have an expertise in it, but it's not your genius. People will come to you and say, hey, we want you to do this. So they come and say, hey, Doug, we want you to do the training. And you're like, oh yeah, I really do a good job with that. But there's that gnawing place inside of you going, yeah, and so here's the other piece. Along the way, you might have to suck it up and do some of that until you can build more into your genius zone. So for you, Doug, if you don't like the spreadsheets and stuff, but you might have had to have done that for long enough to get it going to where you can set that aside. So the question is, do you say, you keep your eyes on, got to get rid of that piece, right? As soon as I can, I'm shifting that away. As soon as I can, I'm shifting that away. So back to so I call it the MPI triad: meaning, purpose, impact. And that's where I start helping people evaluate anything they're doing. Does it have meaning for you? Does it, at some point, do you go, okay, that's significant and I like doing it? Does it have a sense of purpose for you? And that purpose is the thing that you'll push through no matter what to get there. Obstacles won't matter. You're going to push and do it. And then the impact. I believe that first of all, I believe that all of us have a unique impact that is just ours, a unique purpose that's just ours. Nobody else can do it like us. Nobody else has that kind of that mission. So the question is whether we're going to make a difference or not. For me, now this is just me, I'm all about going, am I leaving the world a better place? And one of the things that often happens in the entrepreneurial world is we go, oh, there's an opportunity for profit here. And we can see that opportunity. And at some point, it's necessary to go, does that opportunity move along my impact? Does it live into my purpose, or is it just an opportunity? And if it is, you're going to be hollow with it. Then those are the pieces that whenever I'm evaluating any opportunity coming, I'm looking at a book, you're wed to that. If you write a book, you are wed to that book for a long time. And so, you better really make it hit those things. Is it going to mean something to me? Am I going to see it as a purpose into the world? Is it going to make a difference for other people? And so I use that for every decision I make about opportunities. is this somewhere we want to move into? Does it feed my meaning? Does it feed my purpose? Is it making an impact in the world? Because we're going to make an impact one way or the other, positive, negative. There's no neutral. We're going to make an impact.
I love the meaning, purpose, impact. It's almost like it could either be in a line or a triangle. It could be either way. It's just, it all feeds back into each other. And in order for you to, Nice Guy community, as you're listening to this, those are three great categories to place, that next project or that something that you're going to, or that business that you're going to be putting into your life. Is that the foundation for all of the coaching that you do based upon these three, this triad?
At some level. So there is the coaching I do around relationships, which is not separate from that, but why people come into that is they're like, man, my relationship isn't working, right? And so the relationship isn't creating the meaning they want. They've lost their purpose of where that relationship is going, and the impact they're having on each other even isn't where they want to be, or on their family or anything else. So even there, those pieces are in there, but they are clearly embedded. For instance, this Man of Significance podcast is coming out is based on the fact that I think what creates so many crises for us people, but as men, is not being connected with that meaning, that purpose, that impact. Years ago, I was talking with a guy who was headed off to college, and his father had a successful business, and his father wanted him to come into the business with him. This guy wanted to go into the ministry. And we had this long discussion about, are you making a meaning choice or a profit choice? I mean, that really is what this boils down to. He went into business, and that lasted about 5 years. And he finally turned to his dad and he said, I can't do this. This doesn't feed me. I don't love doing this. And so it took him a kind of a circuitous route to get back to what really had meaning to him. And again, a business, his father actually found that business very meaningful. And so it's not that it's about, like ministry or business. That's not it. It's, does what you're doing bring you that joy, that satisfaction? Even on a bad day, you go, okay, I've done that. For example, I talked with a realtor who was just burned out, very successful realtor, completely burned out. And he said, I just feel like I'm doing transactions. And I said, what's shifted for you? And he said, all I'm doing is chasing the next deal, the next listing, the next whatever. And I said, okay, let's just step back for a minute. What do you absolutely love about what you do? And he had to dig for a bit because of all the stuff that he had built on top of being a successful realtor. And he finally said, I really love it when the family finds their place to be a family, where they find not their house, but their home. I said, what is that like for you? And he said, man, I just remember with my own family, when we finally had that place where we just felt settled, where we felt like we had our roots, and where we felt like we could be a family in that place. And I said, okay, there's your meaning, right? I mean, his meaning in his job is to find people their home. His purpose, therefore, is to make sure that he doesn't do a deal until they have found their right place, not the cheapest place, not the, we'll get you in and then figure it out kind of thing. And what he wanted to do was make sure that his impact in the community was having people settled into places where they, as a family, could experience, the satisfaction of being that family. And, it was not a huge shift. The business kept going. In fact, it started booming after that because the passion he brought into it was not just, hey, which house do you want, this one or this one? I think I can get this one for a better deal. And, after that, it was like, hey, this is going to cost you more, but I can tell that this is a big deal for you. And so all it had to do was a shift in how he was seeing himself, and therefore how he was operating in that business.
Interesting story. And again, think about this, Nice Guy community, as you're going about your activities through the course of the day. Maybe it is just a mind shift, a mind shift of your mindset.
Be careful on that one.
Yeah, a mind shift of your mindset. I mean, it's very interesting to think about it from that perspective as well. Lee, what's like the next? What's on the horizon for not only your business, but in the steps to get people to to thrive in their daily lives, to thrive in their relationships, where do you see people feeling like they are actually making an impact with not only their lives, but their businesses as well? How do you know when it's time to step out of the coaching or the training and just fly on your own?
No, so I'll tell you on the horizon for me over my career. So now I'm clearly at midlife. Unless I'm going to be 106, I'm past midlife. So um, I would love to think that's going to be the case, but the all of the insurance salespeople would probably tell me that's
might not be.
that might not happen. So I'm beyond that midlife point. And so what I've realized is that my shift really is into this area of significance. How not so much how do I feel significant, because I always have the concern that people chase after feeling significant, but how do we be of significance? How do we make a significant difference around us? And that, I find if we look at our world right now, it seems to me that one of the biggest issues is that there are a lot of people who are trying to look significant without doing anything of significance. And so part of my task is to figure out this significance code. That's actually the book that is in production right now, and also a program that's in production of the significance code. That's Man of Significance, is about that. How do you figure out what your unique significance code is, like your fingerprint? It's unique to you. And that's not a I got that right. I mean, that's a ever evolving kind of thing. You can find places as that moves, and as we move through our lives. My kids are now into adulthood, and so my significance of being the father who loves and protects them is very different now than it was before. And I find that to be true along the way. What I was doing when I was working with an agency is different than what I'm doing now in my company. And so what is our specific place of significance can vary over time, but there are going to be some very fundamentally identical pieces. For instance, Doug, you probably will not ever do anything that is non-relational. You're probably not going to take to the basement to do accounting. That's not going to be a shift in your future.
I think you're correct about this assumption.
And instead, what you're going to be doing is evolving ever more into the place where relationships are central and stay central more and more into what you do. And so as you do that, that kind of clarifies things. At some point you go, yeah, that leaves me feeling a little hollow. Okay, I can shift away from that piece. And so for me, it's constantly going, okay, where is the deeper piece? Where's the deeper piece? I always think about that. When I'm gone, what's going to have mattered? Not what are they going to say, oh, Lee Baucom did that, but what's going to have mattered? I used to tell couples when I was doing premarital counseling, you don't need to remember I told you this. Just remember somebody said this, because I want to make a difference in their relationship. I wanted them to remember some pieces of the puzzle. They don't have to remember me. I want them to remember how it can transform them. And same with, what I write. Whenever I'm writing something, I really see it as a letter to somebody that might need to step into something a little bit further. And that, to me, that's my own place of purpose. Can I help people find a little deeper place of meaning? Can I help them clarify their purpose? Can I help them see that they're trying to leave an impact that matters? And if so, I mean, I don't need them to remember who wrote the book as much as them to one day scratch your head and go, man, I learned that somewhere along the way. Somebody told me. I'm good with that.
So Lee, if somebody wanted to work with you, what generally is the way that you are engaged by a potential client? Are they Zoom meetings? Is it personal face-to-face meetings? What's the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Yeah, so I find that still the most reliable way we have communicating is by phone. If they're overseas, I usually use WhatsApp. But I don't do Zoom mainly because it limits, just as you and I were doing early on, trying to adjust our technology to make sure we were on the same page. Mm-hmm. I try to get any barrier out that's going to cause friction. And so I used to do like Skype meetings, and we would spend 10 minutes trying to get everything up and running. And so I'm like, let's just do by phone. So phone and also by email is how I work with people now, so that they can get to me easily. They have They have their connection in their pocket, right? And so it's easy for them to connect with me and me them. And so usually the way people find me is through the podcast, and then they come back to me for the coaching if that connects with them.
So again, Nice Guy community, if you want to take a moment and head over to the show notes, we'll put links in the show notes for not only the Thriveology podcast and the Save the Marriage podcast as well, but for Lee's upcoming release and launch of Man of Significance podcast too. We'll make sure we put those links in the show notes as well. And Lee, thank you so much for sharing not only your message but your inspiration. You are truly a guy that is living the same message that you were putting out there. It sounds like you're thriving in your business, you're thriving in your relationships. And if there was one piece of advice that you could give to yourself going back, let's see, if you're 52 now, so that would be going back maybe 30 years into your early 20s, what would it be that may have an impact not only on your future self, but on on the lives of those that might be listening at that age range right now?
Okay, so I'm going to have to add a piece, and then I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I believe that we have grown up in a culture that has us trying to avoid fear. We use fear as an avoidance indicator. We got to, if we feel the fear, we stay away from it. It's avoidance indicator. Get something fearful, step away. And I think that fear is an importance indicator. Whenever we're feeling fear, all it's saying is, hey, be alert. There's something important here, whatever it is. I mean, if I'm running down a trail and there's something squiggling on the trail, that's important for me to pay attention to. And then I can decide, do I really actually need to, avoid by walking further around? But so many times I hear people, and I did it myself, use fear as an avoidance. So, when I'm coaching somebody and I see it in my own life, and I just look back and go, man, opportunities lost by that fear. And I'll say, hey, we talked about doing this last week. How'd that go? And they say, oh, I didn't do it. And I'll say, well, what happened? What kept you from that? Oh, I was afraid. I don't think fear is, it's not a reason to not do something. It's just an emotion that's there. And so it told me it's important. And so that's the biggest piece. When we're faced with something that brings up fear, that may be the most important thing for us to walk towards. So now I use fear, and I wish I had much earlier, as a way of just saying, hey, this is important to me because it's got my attention. So I've got to pay attention to how I take that on. Instead of avoiding it, I might need to walk right towards that fearful thing, because that may be the thing that turns my life, my career, my job, my relationship, whatever, around.
Wow. Amazing advice. And again, I think that if you are like most in our community, and probably I'd have to put myself in this category, oftentimes I will see that fear. And while there is an opportunity for me to walk towards it, oftentimes I find myself saying, yeah, just hold up a second, just hold up a moment. Again, keeping in mind that fear sometimes is something that we should look towards as growth, expansion, lessons learned, great opportunity for us. I know it's a hard thing to do. And you don't want to put yourself in any kind of danger, but oftentimes, if you take a step closer to it, you will discover that those things that you fear the most probably aren't so bad after all. So, Lee, thank you for sharing your message, and again, your inspiration to all of our community. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks for letting me be here. I loved being here.
My pleasure. So, Nice Guy community, again, make sure you check out the links in the show notes for Lee's website and the podcasts that he has that are airing or soon to be airing as well. Again, Nice Guy community, never underestimate the power of nice. Special thanks to Lee Baucom for being on the show today. Steve O'Brien, go ahead and take us out of here.
For the Nice Guys on Business, I'm Steve O'Brien. Fill up your week with the Nice Guys. Why am I reading this copy? This sucks. Oh yeah, they're paying me. Act like you care. Act like you care.